Well, hello, whoever, wherever, whenever you are. Thank you for showing up. Hope you stay a while. And it's me, Denise Matteau. This bronchial thing is still hanging on, and I understand from the chatter in the quilting circles of the great and glorious land of Utopia that I'm not alone. It's apparently showing its ugly, nasty head everywhere around the world, this bronchial thing. But I do feel a lot better than I did. I've been able to actually do housework for the past couple of days. Today I even did laundry, and I cooked up some pretty good fried chicken and French fries. What I like to do when I go to the trouble of heating up some oil to actually make real fried fish. I said fried chicken, didn't I? No, I cooked up some fried fish. And what I like to do is I like to take a bunch of fish out of the freezer. I buy those packages of fillets, you can get a lot in one bag for a pretty good price for the amount of meals, especially for me. Because I cut the bigger ones, the swai, S-W-A-I. I used to buy ocean perch, but you don't see that anymore. But you see this other fish called swai, which looks very similar to me. Although the ocean perch did have a slightly different color, so I think it is actually a different fish. But it's very similar. And it's a pretty large fillet, so I get 2 meals out of each one. So what I like to do is take a few out, thaw them out, cut them in half, toss them in breading, and then deep fry them to like about 80% done, and then put them back in the freezer so that the next time I cook them, I can either put them in oil again and just finish the frying, or just cook them up in the oven and, heat them up that way. And that's pretty good, actually. Better than processed food from the store. So I was able to do a batch of that and have it ready for the rest of the week. And generally feeling better. Now, enough with the health weather report. Quilter's ADHD. Someone called it QADD, Quilter's Attention Deficit Disorder. I guess you could also call it QADS, Quilter's Attention Deficit Syndrome, where we just keep starting new projects, and we just don't finish them. And I can identify with that, because I'm not even counting the number of project starts I have going on. But eventually, this is what I tell myself, eventually they do get finished. Now this one, because of my health, I wasn't able to really dig anything, didn't have the motivation to go dig things out and work on them. But I had this one quilt going on that I said, well, I can work on that. And that's my row quilt. If you saw my video, shout out to From Small Things, that channel. Well, that lady's name is Sue. I was trying to remember it in the last video and I couldn't. Her name is Sue. And she was showing off a few of her quilts, which I admire her because she does real traditional piecing. Whereas I'm still a wonky quilter. And wonkies, we're the outlaws from the quilt police. They got bolos out on us, and they're not good ones. But that's okay, because I am in transition. I'm a recovering wonky, because I'm in transition from wonky quilting, which is where you don't bother with measurements, you just do it crazy quilt style. And then what I do to make a decent quilt out of my crazy quilt style is I cut the crazy quilts into small little squares, surround them with smooth bits of fabric so they look orderly, and then sew those together, and it comes out, it's a pretty good quilt. Looks like I did it on purpose. But it still doesn't need any precise measuring. Of course, when you start getting into these traditional patterns where you're using the same triangle over and over again to make a beautiful geometric pattern, it has to be precisely measured. And it has to be sewn with neat, fairly precisely measured seams, or it just doesn't work. So it's a big deal to do a real transition from wonky quilting to traditional quilting, or piecing, I should say. I'm not even talking about the quilting, really. I'm talking about the piecing. So, but what I have here is a perfect example of an easy way to make the jump from wonky to traditional. As you see in this part, those little 4 patches and the cloth around them are wonky. The 4 patches are not measured out in even squares. They're rectangular. The pieces around them, I did a lot of what is called coping, where you just add another strip to bring it out to the right size. And what gives them a uniform pattern that makes it a pleasant quilt to look at is that I'm using a limited number of fabrics over and over again. So there's a consistency to the pattern, even though no consistency to the cutting and piecing. So, and that's the second. I've already done that step in a few quilts. I have about 4 or 5. In fact, you can sort of see one over there that's hanging up behind me. Let me get the camera a little bit. No, I don't want to show you my fridge. But anyway, that right. Let's see, I'll do it this way. This right here is a wonky sashed with beige. So that's all it's got. It's got 1 row of sashing. And the sashing, because I do it in rows, it doesn't have to be measured. Because what you do, and I'll show you which one I'm working on, you simply sash 1 row at a time, like so. And then, now I'm using this fuzzy blanket is going to be the batting for this, so I've decided to piece it. Now, if you look, you see those diamonds? Let me take a peek. Yeah, you can see the diamonds. That's where we're making a transition from wonky to traditional. I made some 4 patches. And then I put them on point and trimmed them down to make what is essentially 1 row of traditional piecing. And this row will be placed between the wonkies, so that in the end it's going to look like I sat down and planned out this whole design. It's like, oh, such planning. No, I was making wonkies, and then I just kept going with the same yellow and orange and turquoise sashing. And then I said, okay, when I put the rows on this blanket, I realized I just wasn't going to have enough to make more of these wonky rows. For one thing, I'm starting to run out of this print. And I don't want to introduce any new fabrics, because besides being part of my learning process, this quilt is also part of my purge process, in which I'm trying to rid the apartment of junk scraps. You know, these are not good quality quilter's cottons in neat rectangular pieces from yardage. These are, you know, this goldy yellow color is actually an old ripcord bedspread. This orange is part of the leftover scraps from when I was making, I made myself tank top tunic out of this double gauze cotton. This here is a Robert Kaufman print, actually, that is also the leftovers from another tank top. This is leftover from a sheet that I used for, well, it appears in about 6 different quilts, some of which have found new homes. And this turquoise is an old tablecloth that I picked up at Goodwill. The print is from an old sheet that I picked up at Goodwill that is also used, that's the backing on the winter quilt that I put on the bed this season. Okay, so I'm on, you know, these are what I call purge scraps. And making the transition, when I realized I was not going to have enough fabric to continue, I came up with this additional row. And I have enough of the yellow and burnt orange colors, and I believe I have enough of the turquoise to do all alternate rows through the whole quilt. And that will bring it to the right size to make a twin size quilt. So, I can be very happy that I'm making rapid progress. This was the only thing I really could work on, because the fact that it's a row quilt meant I really am not doing any piecing at this point. I'm strip sewing these pieces together and then cutting them up the way you do when you're using jelly rolls to make 4 patches. Well, I'm doing the same thing, except I made my own jelly rolls out of the orange and yellow fabric. So that's easy, and then strip sewing the turquoise and everything to the existing rows. It doesn't require any measuring. The measuring on the diamonds, it's the natural result of a 2.5 inch wide, approximately 2.5 inch wide strip. So I'm not really measuring it. When you make the decision that you're just going to make a strip of cloth 2.5 inches wide, and my way of having a nice, precise strip, I rip. I don't cut. I'll snip the opening parts and then just tear the fabric. Yes, I know that gives you pulled, frayed borders on that piece, which means I'm sacrificing, you know, they talk about doing a scant 1/4 inch when you sew a quilt. And if you're following one of these book patterns, you've got to pay attention to that. Because if you're going by their measurements, they're figuring you're going to sew a scant 1/4 inch seam all over the place. But since I'm not going by anybody's measurements, I'm just picking up the fabric and looking at it and saying, well, what can I do with this? It doesn't matter that I actually am sewing a very generous 1/4 inch. Probably closer to 3/8 of an inch, because of the pulled, frayed edges. But I think that's a small sacrifice to pay for getting very nice straight strips without much trouble. Plus, there's another part to this. When it frays like that, this is from some denim that I tore into strips. And I take that thread that you have to pull off and most people throw away. Well, I take it and turn it into embroidery cotton for my Boro and Sashiko Japanese stitching, because the Japanese, they're very clever. There's people all over the great and glorious land of Utubia and Etsy and other places online that have got you paying an arm and a leg to get real cotton Sashiko thread. I pull out the frayed denim. If you tear it in one direction, you're going to get white thread. And if you tear it in the other direction, you get indigo thread, which are the 2 traditional colors for real Sashiko. Right? So, here I am. And you can do the same with this. I've got the yellow threads. I've been kind of storing them up. I don't know where I put. Oh, I put them over here in this box, right here. Yeah, I got them in here. I think I got them in here. Well, here's some of the white. And I'm doing the same with the yellow. That is heavy, flat, not shiny. Here's an example of regular embroidery thread. Has that shine to it. And it has 6 ply, so if you want, you can thin it down a bit. This thread is very heavy, but it's flat. It's not shiny, and it's 100% cotton. So I don't feel bad about tearing strips because I pull those threads out, and then it's very easy. You just do this and this with them, and they all come untangled and they're straight. Wind them around a little piece of cardboard. You've got yourself a growing thread collection and a precise match. If it's important to match the color of your quilt pieces and you don't want anything showing, you've got a perfect match. If you're using salvaged threads from the same piece of fabric. The one thing I must say, though, is I don't think weaver's threads, which is what that is, are always as strong as sewing threads. So the thread that you're getting on a spool like this has been wound for the purpose of holding up to the sewing activity. Whereas this thread, all it had to hold up to was one round of activity on the loom as it got woven. After that, it's intact as a piece of cloth. So this thread will break more easily than normal thread. But what I do is I simply make sure to use 2 strands together, and then I double them so that this blue, for example, now that white I would use alone, mostly as ornamental stitching, like when you do the Stashiko geometric patterns. But this can be used for functional seam, because I'll take 2 strands of it together and double them over so that I actually have 4 strands. And that makes up for the fact that it might be a little bit more prone to breakage. And of course you cannot use this on a machine because I made strips of cloth that was about a yard long. So each one, this is a pile of threads which are each about a yard long. Perfect for embroidery work and handwork. Absolutely useless for a sewing machine. Besides the fact that you can see that weaver's thread is lumpy. That would never go through a machine if you could. But as I said, it doesn't matter because sewing thread with a needle only requires that much thread anyway. This is a Zulkin. I try to do one of these a month. Make very nice, heavy-duty cleaning cloth. What I do is I take 2 of my older terry cloth washcloths that are beginning to wear out. As you can see, there's thin spots. So I take them and sew 2 of them together to make a heavy-duty cleaning Zulkin, the Japanese cleaning cloth. And I do one a month. And so I do have a few projects running at the same time, but I was able to, I am focused now on finishing this top, and then I will have to put it aside until I come across some backing cloth for it, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. And then one of the few things I'm spending money on, I'm continuing to buy this vintage print. This is from El Cheapo Stinko layer cakes. No, that's not the brand name, but this particular cotton, a lot of you know about it, but you don't admit it because it's way lower quality than the Tula Pinks and the Liberties and the, what's that other guy, Caffey something or other. I used to think it was two people because his first name is Caffey, Kaffe. I forget the second name, but his patterns are great, very vibrant, tropical-looking prints in many cases. And you've got Robert Kaufman, Tula Pink, Lori Holt, all these designers. And I'm careful to avoid digital print fabric because I don't trust the quality of that stuff. But most of these designers appear to be using good quality manufacturing. And you're paying a lot. It costs quite a bit for a layer cake from one of those brands. But this particular company that I'm referring to as El Chico Stinko, you can get on Amazon, there's about a dozen different general merchandise companies that are selling this stuff, mostly under $20 for like 100 10-inch squares. You got to be careful because the same companies are claiming they're selling fat quarters, but they're getting away with calling a 10-inch square fat quarter because they don't really understand that that is actually a technical term for a 22-inch by 18-inch piece of cloth, a 44-inch wide yard cut into 4 pieces is a fat quarter. But anyway, still, you can get this cloth for about half the price, and it is 100% cotton. And since I'm not counting my learning, my transitional quilts, I am beginning to make market quilts, but they're not show quilts. So I don't worry about the fact that this might only be good for 2 generations of regular use and 3 generations, if they're careful, compared to 200 or 300 years for the other stuff. I'm not worried. Who knows if this world is even going to be here that long. But I did buy another stack, and what I've got going on here, part of my daily round, I work on the row quilt that I just showed you. I got to finish that one Zokin for February. And I pulled 2, whenever I get a layer cake, I pull 2 pieces out and I start working on the 32 HSTs from one pair of squares, in this case 10-inch squares. It'll make 32 very small pin HSTs, half square triangles, which I'm then turning into 8 very small pinwheels and just letting them pile up. When I have a bunch of them, who knows, a year from now maybe, I'll pull them out and make a pinwheel top out of them, a scrappy pinwheel top. But that's just like every time I order a layer cake, I pull out 2 pieces for that. And the rest on this are getting made into pieces for my cathedral windows. And I think with this particular batch that I've got going now, I might have enough to be almost done. I think I might have to order one more layer cake. And I'll have a twin-size cathedral window out of it and a lot left over for other projects like turning them into 32 half-square triangles. And probably be able to put some nice borders. That's part of my transition into traditional quilting. And you don't have to transition into, the fussy measurement. I'll tell you something, this is a major scam pandemic in the quilting villages of the great and glorious land of Utopia. I'm going to be honest with you. You don't need to be spending $20 for a new little plastic template for a common shape like a 4-inch square and a 6-inch, and say, oh, I got 6-inch squares, I got to go buy a 4-inch square. Or I got to buy a tray. It's like, all you need to do is go into the school supply department of your local grocery store and buy what at H-E-B here in Texas, until recently, was a 50-cent wooden 12-inch ruler. That's all you need. In fact, you don't even really need that. It helps with the precision. So, nobody needs those plastic templates. If you're that bound and determined that you need a template to make a precise piece, and I do use templates, I'm not arguing about that. Save a cracker box, your saltine crackers box or your cereal box. I use wax paper when I get a quilt book. I open it to the page that has the templates. And now people can't, I guess they got something going on with copy machines that it'll tell you it can't copy it because of you're violating the copyright. So people have to send off for them. Lay a sheet of wax paper over it. Take a Sharpie and trace the template. Then lay that wax paper over cardboard or stiff paper. I'm going to try something with freezer paper because I know you can iron that down. I'm going to play with that. That's all you need. And cut out your template shape. Even if it's an odd one like a Dresden wedge to make a Dresden flower or something like that. You can still do it with wax paper and cardboard. You don't need to be spending $30, $40 on a piece of plastic. And maybe you're not even going to finish that quilt if you're suffering from quads, quilter's attention deficit disorder. At least with what I'm doing, the only thing I feel guilty about is if I lost time, if I look at a pile of unfinished projects, I can either feel bad that I wasted all that time and didn't finish them, or I can feel great that I've got all these things where I'm already halfway there. The work's already done, so just pick one up and keep on going. That's what I did with this. So when I was sitting, realizing I couldn't do anything except sit here and cough, I was still able to reach over and work on this. So that's my little pep talk for the great and glorious Wonky quilters of the great and glorious land of Utopia. And I'll catch you another time. Don't be afraid to hit the thumbs up. No one will tell if you did, but it'll help the video get out there. Share this around to anyone that you can find who's suffering from quads, quilter's attention deficit, and feels bad about themselves, or somebody who feels defeated by the requirements of the quilt police that you measure and you spend all this money on acrylic templates and you measure everything so carefully, and I can't make a quilt because, well, maybe you can't make that particular quilt that they're showing in their tutorial, but you can come awfully darn close, especially with a row quilt, which does not take planning. You just plan one row across. And I'm using it to practice a block. Since I have the attention deficit problem with quilts, I don't have to practice the same block over and over for one quilt. I just have to do about 5 of them total, maybe 6. 5 or 6 blocks across. In fact, in this one, it's only 3 blocks across. Only 12 blocks in this entire quilt. It's a twin-size quilt. So if you'd go to row quilts for a while, then when you've made a couple of those, you're going to look at your own skills and say, wow, I'm getting pretty good at this. Well, then you can jump up a notch and maybe pick up one of the sew-alongs for the more elaborate things. Like I was watching Deb the Pug Mama. She's got pug meaning her little, what do they call that? It's not pugnacious. It's a pug. I guess that's the whole name of it. It's a little dog with a squishy face, very soft, velvety fur. And she's got a couple of those little dogs. So she calls herself Deb the Pug Mama. And she does a nice live stream where they're doing a quilt called Winter Kisses. And I looked at it and I was in the chat and I said, oh, that's way above my skill level. And she said, no, it isn't. And then I got a closer look at the block she was working on. It's actually not, but it uses several different angles of the same half-square triangle kind of arrangement. So it is calling for more attention than I feel ready to give a single block. But I'm definitely a lot closer to being ready than I would have been this time last year. So that's my encouragement. Before too much longer, I'll be able to tackle one of the more complicated sew-alongs. And, well, that's that. I'll catch y'all later. Thank you for showing up. Hope you stayed to the end. And, like I say, don't be afraid to share, like, subscribe, do all the good stuff. And then go around and do it for a couple other people that you like as well. You'd be surprised. If you go into a channel, and we all should do this once in a while, just go through the community, whatever community you hang out in, and just pull up videos from that channel and throw a comment, even if it's just an emoji saying, hey, I was here, or just a thumbs up, good job. Doesn't matter. The algorithm goes, wow, people are talking about this video. And that gives a huge boost to that channel. So it's a good idea to just run through and leave a little thumbs up emoji in the comments besides hitting the thumbs up under the screen. Then you're giving 2 boosts of energy to that channel. Anyway, God bless y'all. Denise Matto, over and out.